The plate hit the table so hard that the water glass trembled. "Madam, if you cannot afford to eat here, please, I am begging you, do not waste my time." Every head in the restaurant turned. Adunola Savage stood at table 14 in the heart of Ibadan's most talked-about restaurant, Olu Gold, a gleaming, three-floor establishment on Ring Road that had become the city's crown jewel of fine dining. The air smelled of grilled catfish, expensive perfume, and quiet money. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead. Afrobeats played softly through invisible speakers. Waiters in crisp gold and black uniforms moved between tables like they owned every inch of the floor. But the woman at table 14 looked like she did not belong. She was wearing a simple ankara blouse, faded at the shoulders. Her braids were neat but old. She carried a worn leather bag that had seen better years. Her sandals were flat, clean but unremarkable. She had walked in without a reservation, sat down quietly, and ordered a glass of water and a small bowl of pepper soup. That was enough for Taiwo Adegoke to decide everything about her. Taiwo was 26, broad-shouldered, and had been working at Olu Gold for 8 months. He was not a bad man at his core, but tonight he was running late on tips. His rent was due on Friday, and the restaurant manager had warned the staff that the owner was reportedly sending inspectors soon. He was nervous, irritable, and looking in the wrong direction for someone to blame. "I ordered pepper soup," the woman said quietly. Her voice was low, even unbothered. "That is all I want." "Pepper soup alone?" Taiwo crossed his arms, his voice rising just enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Madam, this is not a roadside buka. The minimum order at this restaurant is 3,000 naira. If you are not ordering a full meal, you'll have to leave." A murmur rippled across the dining floor. The woman looked up at him. She was perhaps 55 years old, with sharp, intelligent eyes set in a face that had both lived and survived. There were faint lines at the corners of her mouth, the kind that came not from laughter alone, but from years of making hard decisions. She looked at Taiwo the way a teacher looks at a student making a very avoidable mistake. "There is no minimum order policy at this restaurant," she said calmly. "I am telling you there is." "I know this restaurant very well," she said, still calm, still quiet. "And I am telling you, there is no such policy." Taiwo leaned closer, lowering his voice into something sharp and condescending. "Auntie, I do not want to embarrass you in front of these people, but I can see clearly that you are not a regular customer here. This is not the kind of place for—" he gestured at her ankara blouse with a slight tilt of his head, "for everyone." The entire table to their left went silent. A woman in a red dress lowered her fork. A man in a gray suit looked up from his phone. 2 young women near the window stopped talking. Adunola Savage said nothing. She reached into her worn leather bag, slowly and deliberately, and pulled out a plain white business card. She placed it face down on the table, her fingers resting lightly over it, and then she looked at Taiwo one more time with those still, unreadable eyes. "Bring me my pepper soup," she said softly. "Please." Something about the way she said it made Taiwo's throat tighten. Not the words, the stillness behind them, the complete and total absence of panic or shame. She did not look like a woman who had lost. She looked like a woman who was watching someone else lose and had decided to be kind about it. He walked away, muttering under his breath. He did not bring the pepper soup. Instead, he went to the front desk and spoke briefly with the duty manager, Funmaleo Ogundiel, telling her there was a customer at table 14 who needed to be handled. Funmaleo walked over, professional smile in place, and bent toward the woman with the practiced warmth of someone about to deliver bad news politely. "Good evening, Ma. I'm so sorry for any inconvenience. I'm afraid our table 14 is reserved for this evening. Perhaps another time." Funmaleo. Funmaleo stopped. The woman had said her name, her full name, in a voice that was not a greeting. It was a recognition, precise and unmistakable. Funmaleo straightened slowly. Something moved behind her eyes. A flicker, a shadow of something almost like fear. "I would like my pepper soup," Adunola said again. "And then I would like the full staff roster for the shift printed and brought to me." Quietly. Funmaleo's professional smile dissolved. What replaced it was something complicated and difficult to name. "Yes, Ma," she whispered. She walked quickly back to the kitchen, head down, heels clicking on the polished floor. She did not look at Taiwo as she passed him. But she picked up the kitchen phone, dialed a private number, and when someone answered, she said 3 words in a voice that shook slightly. "She is here." On the other side of the restaurant, at a table near the back that faced the entire floor, a man in a dark agbada looked up from his wine glass. He was handsome, expensive, and currently sitting across from a woman who was not his wife. His name was Adunola Savage, and the woman at table 14 was his wife. He had not seen her yet, but she had seen him the moment she walked in. Adunola did not turn her head. She did not need to. She had spent 23 years married to Adunola Savage, and she had learned his silhouette the way you learn a road you have driven in the dark. Not by seeing it, but by knowing every curve before it comes. She had seen him the moment she stepped through the main entrance. Table 9, back corner, facing the floor. Dark agbada, gold wristwatch, a bottle of red wine between 2 glasses. And across from him, young, laughing, leaning forward in her seat, a woman Adunola did not recognize but understood immediately. She had chosen table 14 on purpose. If Adunola looked up, he would see the wall. She would not be in his direct line of sight. She wanted to observe, not confront. Not yet. This was how Adunola Savage had always operated, quietly, completely, and without warning. She was born in Ogbomo, the 3rd daughter of a fabric trader who believed that the most dangerous weapon a woman could carry was patience. Her father, Babatunde Adila, used to say, "Omomi, do not fight noise with noise. Wait." The truth is always louder in silence. She had carried that lesson through poverty, through a difficult marriage, through miscarriages and financial ruin and rebuilding, and through the slow, deliberate construction of something her husband had never known she possessed. Adunola had married her when she was 32, and he was 38. He was a property developer then, charming, ambitious, full of vision. She was a quiet caterer who ran a small operation out of their flat in Bodija. He told his friends she was temporary, that he would upgrade when the money came. He said it once at a party, and thought she had not heard. She had heard. She spent the next 20 years building something he could not touch, in a name he did not know, with money he had never helped her earn. Olu Gold was hers. Not in his name. Not in their joint account. In the name of a holding company registered in her maiden name, Adunola Adila Enterprises, with a board of 3 people. Her younger sister Sikemi, her childhood friend Bisola, and herself. Adunola did not know. Her staff did not know, except for Funmaleo, who had been with her since the very beginning and who now stood in the back office with a phone pressed to her ear and her hands trembling. The restaurant had opened 4 years ago and had become one of the top 5 fine dining establishments in southwest Nigeria. It had been featured in 2 food magazines, a Lagos lifestyle blog that reached 500,000 readers, and a BBC Africa segment on Nigerian entrepreneurship. Adunola had given that BBC interview wearing a wig and minimal makeup, introducing herself as the executive director, a technically true title that obscured the whole truth. She had built it in secret because she had learned that Adunola destroyed the things he could not control. She had watched him drive 2 businesses into the ground, one belonging to his brother, one belonging to his cousin, through bad decisions and worse pride. She had decided long ago that he would never get close enough to Olu Gold to breathe on it. Now here she sat, in her own restaurant, in her old ankara blouse and her worn sandals, having been publicly humiliated by a waiter who did not know who she was. She took a sip of her water. The pepper soup arrived, finally, brought not by Taiwo but by a younger waiter named Deji, who set it down carefully and disappeared without a word. Adunola wrapped both hands around the bowl, breathed in the steam, yaziza leaf, crayfish, goat meat, the exact recipe she had written herself, and felt something settle in her chest. She had come tonight for a reason. Not for this table. Not for Taiwo's rudeness, which she would deal with in the morning. She had come because Bisola had called her 3 days ago and said, "Adun, your husband has been eating in your restaurant every Thursday evening with the same woman." I thought you should know. She had said nothing. She thanked Bisola. She booked no flight, made no plan, and told no one. She simply drove herself from Lagos to Ibadan that afternoon, wearing ordinary clothes, carrying her old bag, and walked into her own restaurant like a stranger. Now she sat 14 feet from her husband and the woman he was laughing with, and she noted everything. The way he refilled the woman's glass before his own. Kalawol never poured for anyone before himself. The way the woman reached across the table and touched his hand without hesitating. The way he let her. Adunola dipped her spoon into the pepper soup. It was perfect. She pulled out her phone and sent one message to CKME. I'm here. Don't call. Then she sent a second message, this one to a number saved as OA Legal. 3 words only. Start the documents. She dropped the phone face down on the table and continued eating. At table 9, Adunola Savage laughed at something the woman said, rich and loud, the way he used to laugh in the early years. He reached into his jacket pocket and placed something on the table between them. Adunola watched. It was a key. A house key, on a small silver ring, with no tag. The woman picked it up, closed her fingers around it, and smiled. Adunola set down her spoon. There was a house she did not know about. The morning after, Ibadan woke up the way it always did, loudly. Motorcycles cut through the early haze on Molit Road. Women arranged tomatoes in pyramids at the roadside market near Idihin. The air smelled of frying ankara and exhaust and the first possibility of rain. Somewhere in the distance, a church was already singing. Adunola had not slept. She had checked into a modest hotel near Ibadan's old government district, not the Kakanfo Inn or the Premier, where Kalawol's friends gathered and where her face might be recognized, but a clean, quiet guest house called Ifedara, run by an older Yoruba woman who asked no questions and served oji and akara for breakfast without being asked. She sat at the small wooden desk by the window at 6 in the morning, a cold cup of tea beside her, and her laptop open to the files she had not looked at in 3 months. The documents were already moving. Her lawyer, Olatunde Adewale, the OA in her contacts, had confirmed receipt of her message the previous night and had already replied with a preliminary checklist. 23 years of marriage. Shared property in Lagos. The Bodija house Kalawol used as his Ibadan base. 3 joint accounts, 2 of which she had quietly drained her personal contributions from over the past 18 months. She had not been planning divorce. Or rather, she had been planning it the way her father taught her to plan anything important, slowly, without announcing it, until the plan was so complete that execution was almost simple. The key Kalawol had handed that woman bothered her more than the woman herself. It was not that she was surprised. She had known about Kalawol's wandering since the 8th year of their marriage, when she had found a hotel receipt in the pocket of his agbada during laundry, a receipt from a hotel in Port Harcourt on a weekend. He had told her he was in Abuja. She had ironed his agbada, replaced the receipt, and said nothing. She had started a savings account the following Monday. What bothered her about the key was the implication of permanence. Kalawol had bought a woman a house, or given her access to one. That was not an affair, that was infrastructure. That was a second life, being constructed parallel to hers, funded almost certainly by the same money he had borrowed from her 14 months ago when his Lekki development deal fell through. She needed to know which property. She opened a new browser tab and typed into the Corporate Affairs Registry portal. Her access was legitimate. She was listed as a director of 3 registered companies and had used the portal for business filings. She typed Kalawol's full name, Kalawol Adunola Savage. 7 results. She had known about 4 of them. The 5th was a residential property holding company, registered 11 months ago. Director. 1 Yatund Fasanya. The registered address was a building in Ibadan's New Akobo extension. Adunola leaned back in her chair. Yatund Fasanya. She wrote the name in her notebook in neat block letters. Then she heard her phone ring. Not her personal number. The restaurant line, which she had rerouted quietly to a secondary phone she kept for management use. She answered it. Good morning. The voice was male, unfamiliar, brisk. I'm trying to reach the management of Olu Gold Restaurant. I'm calling from Platform 24. We're a food and lifestyle media company based in Lagos. We've been selected to feature Olu Gold in our upcoming documentary on African luxury dining. We wanted to confirm the owner's availability for an interview. Adunola said nothing for a moment. Then, carefully, "Who gave you this number?" "We reached out through your restaurant's general inquiry line. We've been trying to connect for a few weeks." We spoke briefly with a fun Malayo. "I see."
She paused.
"I'll have someone from our communications office return your call." She ended the call. Fun Malayo. Of course. Fun Malayo, who is supposed to route all external media inquiries through Adunola's personal approval process. Fun Malayo, who had panicked last night when Adunola walked in unannounced. Fun Malayo, who had looked like someone who was carrying a secret she had not been asked to carry. Adunola picked up her second phone and called Fun Malayo directly. It rang 4 times.
5.
6. No answer. She stared at the phone for a long moment. In 23 years of Adunola Adila Enterprises, Fun Malayo Ogundiel had answered every call before the 3rd ring. Adunola stood up. She crossed to the window and looked down at the waking street below, the Okada riders, the school children in uniform, the woman selling groundnuts from a plastic basin balanced on her head. Then she called CK. "CK, I need you to go to the restaurant before opening. Don't announce yourself. Check Fun Malayo's office desk, specifically the middle drawer. And check the media correspondence folder on the shared drive." "Adun, what is happening?" "I'm not sure yet," Adunola said. "But I think someone has been using my restaurant to open a door they were never given the key to."
She paused.
"Call me the moment you get there." She hung up and stood very still, looking at nothing in particular, her mind working the way it always worked best, quietly, completely, and without mercy. At Olu Gold, across the city, a black Toyota SUV had been parked outside since 7 in the morning. The windows were tinted. The engine was off. No one went in or out. But the driver was watching the entrance. CKME arrived at Olu Gold at 8:47 in the morning. The restaurant did not open until noon, but the kitchen staff usually began prep by 9. The back entrance, a heavy gray door off the service lane behind the building, was already unlocked when she tried it. That was unusual. That door had a digital keypad and was supposed to remain sealed until the head chef, Abio Dunn, arrived at 9:15. CKME was 39, 5 years younger than Adunola, and where her sister was still and deliberate, CKME was quick and observant, the kind of woman who noticed which pot had been moved and which chair had been sat in and which person in a room was trying too hard to look relaxed. She stepped into the service corridor and listened. Voices. 2 of them, coming from the direction of Fun Malayo's office. She did not announce herself. She walked quietly, her flat leather sandals making almost no sound on the tile. The office door was slightly open, and through the gap, she could see Fun Malayo standing with her back to the door, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in a low, fast voice. She was here last night. She sat at table 14. Yes, she ordered, she ate, she left. I don't know how long she was watching. Yes. A pause. I understand. I just need to know what you want me to do about the agreement. CKME's jaw tightened. She pushed the door open. Fun Malayo spun around. The phone dropped slightly from her ear. The blood visibly left her face. I'll call you back, Fun Malayo said into the phone, and ended the call without waiting for a reply. For 3 full seconds, the 2 women looked at each other. Who were you speaking to? CKME said. Fun Malayo straightened. She was 44, impeccably dressed even in the morning, a woman who had managed the front operations of Olu Gold since its 2nd month of business. She had been Adunola's most trusted employee, past tense, because the look on CKME's face was making it clear that a line had just been crossed and the crossing had been witnessed. That was a supplier, Fun Malayo said. Fun Malayo. It was. I heard the word agreement. CKME walked to the desk. Open the middle drawer. CKME, you have no authority to. I am a director of this company, CKME said, her voice completely flat. Open it. A long moment passed. Fun Malayo reached down and pulled open the drawer. Inside was a thick envelope, unsealed, sitting on top of a stack of supplier invoices. Sikemi picked it up and looked inside. It was a draft agreement, 15 pages, printed, with sticky tab markers on several sections. The header read, Business Acquisition and Management Transition Agreement, Olu Gold Restaurant, Ibadan. The acquiring party listed was a company called Sango Hospitality Group. The seller was listed as Olu Gold Management Holdings, represented by Funmilayo Ogundiel, Chief Operating Officer. Funmilayo had been negotiating the sale of the restaurant without Adunola's knowledge, without the board's authorization, representing herself as having the authority to sell. Sikemi flipped to the last page. The signature line for seller's representative had Funmilayo's name typed below it. And in the line for seller's principal authorization, the line where the actual owner was supposed to sign, someone had already filled in a name. Not Adunola, Adila. The name typed there was Adunola Savage. Sikemi raised her eyes slowly from the page. Funmilayo was looking at the wall, jaw clenched, the posture of a woman who had known this moment was coming and had been dreading it anyway. He told her he owned it, Sikemi said. It was not a question. Funmilayo did not answer. He told Sango Hospitality Group that he was the owner of this restaurant, and you helped him. Sikemi set the papers down on the desk with a controlled deliberateness that was more frightening than any raised voice. How long? Funmilayo finally looked at her. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. He came to me 4 months ago. He said Adunola had authorized a restructuring. He showed me documents, a letter on her letterhead. Forged. I didn't know that then. And by the time I suspected, he told me that if I didn't cooperate, he would expose. She stopped. Expose what? Funmilayo pressed her lips together. What does he have on you, Funmilayo? A tear ran down one cheek. She wiped it precisely, like an inconvenience. He found out about the money. From year 2. I borrowed 40,000 naira from the petty cash account to pay my mother's hospital bill. I paid it back, every naira, within 6 weeks. But I didn't tell Adunola. And he has the original ledger with the discrepancy. The room was quiet. Sikemi picked up her phone and called Adunola. 1 ring.
2.
CK. Adunola answered, her voice as calm as still water. What did you find? Sikemi looked at Funmilayo. She looked at the 15-page agreement in her hand. Adun, she said quietly, your husband tried to sell your restaurant. The silence on the other end was brief, just 2 seconds. The silence of a woman confirming something she had suspected, but not yet named. How far along is the agreement? Adunola asked. Sikemi checked the document. 1 page near the back had a handwritten note with a date circled in red. 3 weeks, Sikemi said. They have 3 weeks before the signing deadline. Good, Adunola said. That's enough time. Adunola drove back to Lagos that same afternoon in silence. No music. No phone calls. Just the road and her thoughts, which had always been better company than noise. She had called Olatunde from the car within 10 minutes of Sikemi's revelation, and he had spent most of the drive outlining what they were dealing with. Kalawol had apparently approached Sango Hospitality Group 6 months ago, introducing himself as the principal investor behind Olu Gold. He had produced documentation, including a forged letter of authorization bearing Adunola's signature. He had been in active negotiation for the sale of the restaurant at a price of 420 million naira. The forgery alone is a criminal offense, Olatunde said. And fraudulent misrepresentation in a commercial transaction carries serious liability. We can file an injunction to halt the acquisition. We can also file criminal fraud charges simultaneously. How solid is our position?
Adunola asked.
Completely solid, Olatunde said. The restaurant is in your name. The holding company is in your name. His name appears nowhere in the legitimate documentation. The only question is whether Sango Hospitality Group was acting in good faith or whether they knew.
Find out, she said.
Discreetly. By the time she pulled into the compound of their Lagos home, a wide, cream-colored duplex in an estate off the Lekki-Ape Expressway, it was almost 7 in the evening. Kalawol's car was in the driveway. The lights were on in the sitting room. She sat in her car for a moment. They had 2 children, Temito P., 20, currently in her second year at Covenant University, and Akani, 17, in secondary school. Both of them were at school, not home. The house would be just the two of them. She had not decided yet how to play this conversation,
or if she would have it at all tonight.
She had thought on the drive down about the kind of woman who would walk into that restaurant last night, walk into her own building, be publicly shamed by a junior staff member, watch her husband hand a key to another woman, and feel nothing crack. Not because she had no feeling, but because she had trained herself over 20 years of marriage to a man who measured power by reaction, never to give him the satisfaction of seeing her shaken. She got out of the car. Callowell was in the sitting room, laptop open on the center table, a bottle of Star beer sweating on a coaster beside him. He glanced up when she entered. "You traveled," he said, not a question. His eyes went briefly to her old bag. "Where?"
"Ibadan," she said.
Something moved in his face, just a flash, quickly covered. "Business." "A visit," she said simply. She went to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and came back through the sitting room without stopping. "I'm tired.
Good night."
Adunola. She paused at the foot of the stairs. "Have you heard of a company called Sango Hospitality Group?" he asked. She felt the question like a hand reaching into her chest, not in fear, but in recognition. He was testing her. He wanted to know how much she knew. He was doing what he always did, throwing a line into the water before she did, to see what came back. She turned and looked at him with an expression of complete blankness.
"No," she said.
"Should I have?" He studied her face for 3 long seconds. Then he looked back at his laptop.
"No."
"It's nothing.
Good night."
She climbed the stairs. In her room, she locked the door quietly, sat on the edge of the bed, and placed both palms flat on her knees. She breathed slowly, in through her nose, out through her mouth, the way her father had taught her when she was 8 years old and had just fallen off a market stool and was trying not to cry. Then she opened her bedside drawer and took out a small leather-bound notebook. She turned to a fresh page and wrote 3 things. 1. Sango Hospitality Group, connection to Yatunfasanya? Investigate. 2. Forge documents, secure originals before he moves them. 3. Tell Temito P. and Akani. Carefully. After. She stared at the 3rd line for a long time. Her children did not know. Temito P. had always been closer to her father, sharp and admiring of his confidence, unaware of the rot beneath it. Akani was sensitive, young, still building himself. What she did in the next 3 weeks would shape how both of them understood the word family for the rest of their lives. She had to be careful. She closed the notebook and lay back on the bed without undressing. Her phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "Mrs. Savage. You don't know me, but I think you should know that the man negotiating the sale of your restaurant is not doing it alone. Call me when you can. My name is Remy." Adunola sat up slowly. She stared at the message for a full minute. Then, carefully, she typed back, "Who are you?" The reply came in seconds. "I'm Sango Hospitality Group's lead attorney. And I'm the person who realized 3 days ago that the documents we've been given are forged. I want to help you, but I need you to move fast because the other person involved in this deal found out I started asking questions." Adunola's fingers tightened around the phone. "Who is the other person?" She typed. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, "Your restaurant's manager. Funmaleo Ogundiel. She's been feeding information to your husband for months. But there's more, Mrs. Savage. She's been offered a 10% ownership stake in the new deal. She didn't just cooperate under threat. She agreed." The room felt very still. The next morning, Adunola did not go to her office. She sat in her car outside a quiet cafe in Suralere and waited for Remy Babatide. He arrived 7 minutes early, a slight, bookish man in his late 30s, wire-framed glasses, a brown leather briefcase, the kind of person who looked more like an accountant than an attorney but whose eyes moved quickly and missed nothing. He scanned the cafe before he sat down, and the scan itself told her enough. This was someone who had recently realized he was in something dangerous. He placed a manila folder on the table. "I've been with Sango for 5 years," he said, without preamble. This is the biggest acquisition we've attempted. The CEO, Adesoji Sengo, personally brokered the introduction with your husband. They go back, Ikora boys, same secondary school. He trusts him completely. So, Adesoji doesn't know the documents are forged. I don't believe so. Not yet. Remy pushed the folder toward her. But I found the discrepancy 3 days ago when I cross-checked the CAC registration. The restaurant's holding company is registered entirely in your maiden name. Your husband's name appears nowhere. When I brought it to the attention of our junior partner, she told me to drop it, that the principal had provided satisfactory verbal confirmation. Adunola opened the folder. Inside were copies of the documents Kalawol had submitted, the forged letter, a falsified share structure document, and a fake board resolution authorizing the sale. She studied the forged version of her signature. It was not bad.
Close.
But the loop on the A was wrong, and the underline of the final E had a slight upward curl that her real signature never produced. Whoever had done it had studied an old document, probably something from 4 or 5 years ago, before the tiny arthritis in her right hand had changed the weight of her pen grip. My husband did not forge this himself, she said. No, Remy agreed. The document authentication watermarks are consistent with a professional document fabrication service that requires connections and money. And Funmaleo provided access to the letterhead. Remy said nothing, which was answer enough. Adunola closed the folder. Why are you bringing this to me? Because I cannot in good conscience facilitate a fraudulent acquisition. And because when I looked up Adunola Adila Enterprises, he paused, adjusted his glasses. I found a profile. BBC Africa. 4 years ago. You were careful, but careful enough that I recognized the restaurant in the background footage. I recognized your hands. He glanced at her briefly. You built something real. I don't want to be the person who helped someone steal it. She looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded once. I'm going to ask you to do something uncomfortable, she said. I need you to continue as though nothing has changed. Proceed with the acquisition process. Ask no more questions that might alert my husband. Give me 10 days. Remy blinked. You want me to? Keep pretending, she said simply. I need 10 days to position everything legally. If Kalawol suspects the deal is in trouble before I am ready, he will move things I cannot recover. Remy was quiet for a moment. Then slowly he nodded. 10 days, he said. She stood, picked up her bag, and then paused. One more thing. The woman, Yatund Fasanya. Do you know her involvement? Remy's expression shifted. Something uncomfortable moved through it. She attended 2 of the negotiation meetings, he said carefully. She was introduced as a business partner. She reviewed the draft agreement. Adunola absorbed that. Yatund was not a peripheral figure. She was not simply a woman Kalawol was seeing. She was embedded in the plan. She knew what was being done, and to whom. Thank you, Remy, Adunola said. She walked out of the cafe and sat in her car and called Olatunde. File the injunction, she said. But don't serve it yet. Hold it ready. And prepare a criminal fraud complaint with all attached documentation. Understood, Olatunde said. Adunola, do you want to include Funmaleo in the complaint? She thought of Funmaleo's wet eyes in that office. The borrowed 40,000 naira. The sick mother. The fear that had made her vulnerable to a man who collected people's vulnerabilities like tools. Not yet, she said. Give her a chance to tell the truth herself. She started the car.
Her phone rang.
The caller ID read, Temitope, her daughter, calling from Covenant University at 9 in the morning on a Wednesday. She answered immediately.
P.
Mummy. Her daughter's voice was strange. Low, thick. Mummy, I need to ask you something. And I need you to tell me the truth. The hairs on Adunola's arm rose slowly. What is it, my love? Daddy called me last night. He said you've been taking money from his business. He said you've been hiding assets. He said he's been talking to a lawyer. A pause. Her daughter's voice cracked. Mummy, is something happening? Are you two getting divorced? Because he said if you don't stop, he's going to take us from you. The engine hummed. Adunola gripped the steering wheel. Kalawol had called their daughter. He had called a 20-year-old girl and told her that her mother was a thief. He had used his own child as a weapon. And he had done it to make Adunola hesitate. She breathed in slowly. "P, listen to me," she said. Her voice was steady and warm and completely controlled. "I want you to go to your morning class. Do not miss anything. I will come to you this weekend, and I will explain everything. I promise you, everything will make sense." "Mummy, I promise you," she said again. "Trust me." She ended the call and sat very still. He had used tematope. She picked up her notebook, opened it to the page with the 3 items, and added a 4th.
For, he used P.
No more waiting.
Move now.
Adunola moved fast, and she moved quietly, and she moved all at once. On Thursday morning, she personally appeared at the Corporate Affairs Commission office in Lagos with Olatunde beside her and filed a formal report of fraudulent document forgery and commercial fraud in her name, attaching certified originals of all Olu Gold Holding Company documents. The report was received, stamped, and assigned a case reference number before noon. At 1:30, Olatunde served the acquisition injunction on Sengo Hospitality Group's registered address, formally halting the sale of Olu Gold pending judicial review. Remy, who had been waiting for this, forwarded the served documents to Adesoji Sengo within the hour. At 3 in the afternoon, Adunola drove to Olu Gold. She had called ahead, but not to Funmaleo. She called Abiodun, the head chef, and told him to assemble the full staff in the main dining room at 3:30 before the evening shift began. She gave him no other information. She arrived at 3:25. She walked in through the main entrance, not the back. She was dressed differently today, a deep burgundy attire blouse with wide sleeves, tailored trousers, her hair wrapped in a matching gelly, and heels that made a clear, purposeful sound on the polished floor. The staff was assembled. 17 people, including Abiodun, 3 sous chefs, 5 waiters, 3 host staff, 2 cleaners, a bookkeeper, a bar manager, and Funmaleo. And Taiwo, the waiter who had shamed her 2 nights ago. He stood near the back, arms folded, with a self-contained expression of someone who did not yet know which direction danger was coming from. Adunola stood at the head of the room and waited until every eye was on her. "Good afternoon," she said. "My name is Adunola Savage. I am the sole owner of Olu Gold Restaurant and of Adila Enterprises, the holding company that operates this establishment." She let that sentence land before continuing. "I have managed this business quietly for 4 years because that was my choice. Some of you have met me before. Most of you have not. But all of you work for me." Silence. Taiwo's arms dropped slowly from their folded position. "I was here on Tuesday evening," she continued. "I sat at table 14. I was wearing my own clothes, carrying my own bag, and I ordered pepper soup, which is not only on our menu, but is one of the dishes I personally approved when we opened." She paused. "I was told that there was a minimum order policy at this restaurant. There is no such policy." She looked at Taiwo directly. "I was also told, in front of the entire dining room, that this restaurant was not a place for everyone. I was assessed by my appearance and asked to leave my own establishment." Taiwo's face had gone gray. "I'm not here to humiliate anyone," she said. "I'm here because this restaurant was almost stolen from me. And I want every person in this room to understand from this moment forward that the standards we keep here, in service, in honesty, and in how we treat every human being who walks through that door, are a direct reflection of what I built and what I intend to protect." She turned to Funmaleo, who was standing to the left, very still, her face composed in the careful blankness of someone who had been expecting an execution and was now measuring its shape. "Funmaleo," Adunola said, "please come to the office."
Now.
The room stayed silent as the 2 women walked out. In the office, Adunola closed the door and sat behind the desk. Funmaleo remained standing. "Sit down," Adunola said. Not unkindly. Funmaleo sat. Adunola folded her hands on the desk. "Tell me everything from the beginning. Not the version you have prepared. The real one." For a long moment, Funmaleo said nothing. Then, slowly, something in her cracked open, Not dramatically, not with sobs, but with the quiet collapse of someone who has been carrying something too heavy for too long. She talked for 40 minutes. It had started, she said, not 4 months ago but 18. Callowell had come to the restaurant on a day Adunola was in Port Harcourt for a supplier meeting. He had come through the back, said he was picking up documents for his wife. Funmaleo had let him in, he was her employer's husband. She had no reason not to. He had gone into the office briefly. She had thought nothing of it. 2 months later, he came again. This time with the ledger discrepancy. The 40,000 naira. The hospital bill. The 6-week gap. He had been thorough, and he had been kind about it, which was worse than if he had been cruel. He told her he did not want to cause trouble. He told her this could be between them. He told her all he needed was small cooperation over time. He had built the leverage slowly, asking for small things first, a floor plan, a staffing schedule, a copy of the supplier contracts. Then larger things, access to the company's seal, blank letterhead, a key to the document storage room. She had told herself each time that it was the last time. And the 10% stake? Adunola asked quietly. Funmaleo closed her eyes briefly. He told me the sale would go through regardless of what I did. He said if I was part of the agreement, I would at least have something. He said. She stopped. He said you would never have to know I was involved. Adunola was quiet. Do you have children, Funmaleo? 2, she said softly. Ages 9 and 12. Adunola nodded slowly. Callowell found you at your most afraid, she said.
And he used that.
What you did was wrong, but what he did was worse. She stood. I am not filing charges against you, but you will write a full witness statement for my lawyer. You will testify if it comes to that. And your position here, she paused. We'll discuss when this is over. Funmaleo nodded. A tear ran down her cheek and dropped onto her lap without her trying to stop it. Adunola walked to the door and then stopped. The 40,000 naira. The hospital. Did your mother recover? Funmaleo looked up, surprised.
Yes.
She's fine now. Good, Adunola said. And she meant it. She walked back into the dining room. Taiwo was still standing where she had left him. He had not moved a single inch in the 20 minutes she was gone. He was holding his uniform cap in both hands and looking at the floor. When she came closer, he looked up. And what she saw on his face was not the defensive calculation of someone preparing excuses. It was something younger and rawer than that. Madam, he said. His voice was unsteady. I am sorry. What I did was, there is no excuse for it. I judged you, and I spoke to you in a way no human being should be spoken to. I am sorry. Adunola looked at him for a moment. Why do you work here, Taiwo? She asked. He blinked. My mother, he said after a pause. She has a shop in Oju. I'm saving to expand it for her. She nodded once. Then do this work like it means something, she said. Every person who enters this building is someone's mother. Someone's story. Treat them accordingly. She left the dining room before he could respond. Outside, as she was getting into her car, her phone rang. It was Adesoji Sengo, the CEO of Sengo Hospitality Group. She answered. Mrs. Savage, he said. His voice was controlled, but she could hear the thread of alarm underneath it. I want you to know that I had no knowledge that the documents were forged. I was deceived. I am prepared to fully cooperate with any legal process. I believe you, she said. Have your attorney speak with mine? Of course. A pause. Mrs. Savage, I've been told, properly now, what your restaurant actually is. What you built. Another pause. It's extraordinary. She started her car. Thank you, Adesoji, she said. I know. She drove away from the restaurant she had almost lost, into the Ibadan evening, toward whatever came next. Her phone buzzed. A message from Callowell. I know you went to the restaurant. We need to talk. Tonight. She read it, set the phone down, and did not reply. She met Callowell in the sitting room at 9 that night. He was already there when she arrived, which meant he had been waiting. Callowell waiting was unusual. Callowell seated instead of pacing was unusual. The glass of water in his hand instead of beer was unusual. She recognized all of it immediately, the architecture of a man performing composure he did not feel. She sat across from him, placed her bag beside her feet, and waited. Sango called me, he said. I know. He said you filed a fraud complaint.
His jaw moved.
With the CAC. I did. He looked at her, directly, for the first time in perhaps 2 years. Not the glancing acknowledgement of two people who shared a house, but actually looking at her, trying to read what was there. She allowed him to look. Adunola, he said. We have been married for 23 years. Yes, she said. What you're doing, this will destroy everything. The children. You called Temitope, she said. Her voice did not change. You told a 20-year-old girl that her mother was stealing from you. You used your daughter as a tool to make me afraid. She paused. That is what is destroying something. He looked away. The glass moved in his hands. I made mistakes, he said. Which ones are you referring to? He was quiet. The restaurant, she asked. The forgery? The woman in Akobo, whose house you paid for with the money you borrowed from me? Which specific mistakes, Kalawol? He turned back to her, and now there was something less composed in his face, something that could have been anger or could have been shame, and was probably both. How long have you known, he asked. About the restaurant? Since 3 days ago. She crossed her hands in her lap. About Yatan Fasanya? Since Tuesday night. Tuesday, he stopped. Something moved through his face. You were at Olu Gold. I was having pepper soup, she said. The silence that followed was enormous. Kalawol set down the glass very slowly, as though it required careful management. He leaned forward, put both elbows on his knees, and pressed both hands against his forehead. It was the posture of a man trying to contain something that was expanding faster than he could manage. She watched him. There had been a time, 15 years ago, when that posture would have moved her, when she would have gone to him, put her hand on his back, asked what she could do. She examined herself for that impulse now, and found only stillness. I can fix this, he said to the floor. The forgery?
The whole thing.
I can tell Sango it was a miscommunication. There are people I know at the CAC. The complaint will not be withdrawn, she said. He looked up sharply. I will not allow it to be withdrawn, she said clearly. What was done was criminal, and it will be addressed through proper legal channels. You would put me in prison. I would let the law decide what happens to you. Those are not the same thing. He stood, and she watched him stand, the full height of him, the broad shoulders, the expensive agbada from Tuesday evening still hanging on the chair by the stairs. He was not threatening her, but he was trying to fill the room the way he always had when he was losing an argument.
What do you want? He said.
Tell me what you want. I want the children to know the truth, she said. Told properly. By us, together, before a lawyer tells them in pieces. He blinked, apparently expecting a different demand. I want the Bodija property disclosed fully in the asset statement, she continued. I want Yatan Fasania's company removed from any document that references our family name. And I want your full cooperation with Olatunde's office on the divorce proceedings. Divorce. He said the word like it was a new one. We have been at the end of this road for a long time, she said. I think both of us know that. He was quiet for a very long moment. The room around them held 23 years of shared air, children's voices, Sunday morning jollof rice, arguments, silence, and the long, slow erosion of something that had once been genuine. I didn't know, he said finally quietly, that the restaurant was yours. I know, she said. If I had known. I know, she said again. And this time there was something in her voice that was not cold, but was not warm either. It was honest. That is exactly why I didn't tell you. He sat back down heavily in the chair. What about Temitope and Akani? I will go to P this Saturday, she said. I would like you to be there. If you can manage to tell the truth, she paused, it will be better for them coming from both of us. He nodded. She stood, picked up her bag, and turned toward the stairs. Adunola.
She stopped.
He stopped. Started again. The restaurant. What you built. What I didn't know you were building. A pause. I'm sorry. She said nothing for a moment. She was looking at the wall above the stairs, where a family photograph hung in a silver frame, herself, Kalawol, Tematope at 10, a canny at 7, taken in the garden on a Sunday morning in a time that felt like a different country. "I know," she said, and went upstairs. She did not cry that night. She lay in the dark and thought about her father, and what he would say, and decided he would say nothing. He would simply nod, slowly, the way he always did when something he had prepared her for had finally arrived. She fell asleep before midnight for the first time in a week. She did not know that downstairs, Callowell had picked up his phone and was typing a message to Yatund Fasania, and that Yatund was not answering, and had not answered in 24 hours. And that Yatund, whose name appeared on a company document that was now part of a live fraud complaint, had already spoken to her own attorney, and that her own attorney had, that afternoon, filed a separate civil claim against Callowell. The court hearing was set for a Thursday. Not a full trial, a preliminary hearing on the injunction, at which Sango Hospitality Group would formally acknowledge the fraudulent documentation, and Callowell would be required to appear and answer for his role. Olatunde had moved efficiently, and the judge assigned to the case, a sharp, unhurried woman in her 60s named Justice Adela Bia with acute MGB, had a reputation for running a court that did not entertain delay tactics. Callowell arrived with a lawyer Adunola had never met, someone from a Abuja firm, expensive and polished, which told her that Callowell had been making calls he was not telling her about. He had signed the cooperation agreement 4 days earlier, witnessed by Olatunde. He had agreed to full asset disclosure. He had agreed not to contest the divorce. And he had agreed, in the presence of both attorneys, to appear before Justice B with acute MGB and confirm that the documents bearing Adunola's name were not authorized by her. But Abuja lawyers did not come cheap, and they did not come simply to confirm agreements already signed. Adunola watched the Abuja lawyer, a Mr. Olatunde, speak with Callowell in the corridor outside the courtroom, heads close together, voices low. She noted the angle of Callowell's jaw. He was not disagreeing with whatever was being said. He was being persuaded. She turned to Olatunde. "He's trying to change position." Olatunde had already seen it. "He can try. The cooperation agreement is signed. If he recants it, he creates a worse exposure for himself. Olatunde knows that." "Then what is he telling him?" Olatunde watched the two men carefully. "I think he's telling him to give up the restaurant claim and redirect attention to the marriage assets. Separate the fraud from the divorce. Make this about marital finances instead of criminal forgery. That protects him from the criminal exposure," Adunola said. "It tries to." She straightened her gully slightly and walked into the courtroom. The hearing lasted 2 hours. Callowell confirmed, under direct questioning, that the authorization letter bearing Adunola's signature was not produced by her. He said, however, through Mr. Olatunde, that the transaction had been executed under the reasonable belief that Adunola's verbal consent had been given in the context of a marital business discussion. Justice B with acute MGB looked at Mr. Olatunde over her reading glasses for a long, steady moment that filled the entire courtroom. "Counsel," she said, "you are asking this court to accept that a verbal marital conversation constitutes authorization for a 420 million naira commercial transaction, complete with forged documentation?" The courtroom was perfectly silent. "Your Honor, we are simply establishing context." "The injunction stands," Justice B with acute MGB said. "I am referring the criminal fraud component to the prosecutor's office for further assessment. Parties are to return in 30 days. She removed her glasses. "And, counsel, I strongly suggest you advise your client to spend those 30 days cooperating fully, rather than constructing context." Outside the courtroom, Callowell stood in the corridor with his Abuja lawyer. His face was tight. His collar looked suddenly too small. Adunola passed him, without stopping. He said her name. She paused, turned. "I need to talk to you about a canny," he said. His voice was different now. The performance had left it. This was just a man, somewhere past the middle of his life, understanding perhaps for the first time that he had been reckless with things that cannot be put back. "A canny is fine," she said. "He's with my sister this weekend. He knows only that his parents are separating.
He does not know the rest."
"I intend to keep it that way for as long as possible."
"He called me," Callowell said.
"Last night." He asked me if I had done something bad. Adunola looked at him. What did you tell him? She asked. Kalawale's eyes moved away. I told him that adults sometimes make choices they regret. She studied his face.
That was honest, she said.
I told him that his mother was, he stopped, cleared his throat. I told him his mother was the most capable person I had ever known. She said nothing.
I told him that, he said.
Because it is true. She breathed in through her nose, slow and careful, and looked at the man she had spent 23 years beside, the man she had quietly outgrown, quietly outlasted, quietly built an entire world away from. She did not feel victory. She did not feel love. She felt something more complicated than either, the particular sadness of watching someone arrive at a truth 20 years too late. We will co-parent well, she said finally. I need you to commit to that. I will, he said. And she believed him. She walked out of the building into the Abadan afternoon. Sikemi was waiting by the car, arms crossed, looking like she had been reviewing contingency plans in her head for the past 2 hours. When she saw Adunola's face, she relaxed slightly. How did it go? The injunction stands. The criminal referral is in motion. Adunola opened the car door. He told Akani I was capable. Sikemi blinked. That's unexpected. People surprise you sometimes, Adunola said. Even the ones who have already disappointed you. She got in the car. Her phone buzzed. A message from Temitope. Mummy. I spoke with Daddy yesterday. He told me some things.
I'm not angry at you.
I just want to understand. Can we talk this weekend? Adunola pressed the phone to her chest for a moment. Then she replied, Yes, my love. This weekend. I'll tell you everything. She set the phone down. Sikemi started the car. They drove in comfortable silence for a few minutes, through the wide, warm afternoon streets of Abadan, past the open markets and the churches, and the children running toward something with that purposeful urgency that only the young have, and Adunola felt something lift from her shoulders. Not everything. Not completely. But enough to breathe differently. There's something I didn't tell you, Sikemi said suddenly. Adunola looked over. The Platform 24 documentary team, Sikemi said. The one that called about featuring Olu Gold. I spoke with their producer today, while you were in court. She glanced at her sister. They want to feature you specifically, not the restaurant.
You.
The story of how you built it. A pause. And someone sent them the full recording of Tuesday night. The dining room. Table 14. The waiter. Adunola was very still. Someone in the restaurant recorded it, Sikemi said carefully. Apparently it's been circulating. Quietly for now. But the producer says it's powerful. A woman being shamed in her own restaurant. She paused. Without knowing. The car moved through the afternoon city. How many people have seen it? Adunola asked. 40,000, as of this morning, Sikemi said. And rising. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning in October, the sun came into Abadan the way it always did at that time of year, sideways and golden and unapologetic, falling through the palm trees and across the rooftops and into the tall windows of Olu Gold restaurant where, for the first time in the establishment's 4-year history, every table was booked before 9 in the morning. There was a story going around. Not a rumor, a real story, confirmed and documented and told with the kind of specific detail that made it impossible to dismiss. It had been on Platform 24. It had been on 3 Yoruba entertainment blogs. It had been shared in WhatsApp groups across 5 states. It had reached the diaspora in London and Houston and Toronto, where women who had grown up eating pepper soup in their mother's kitchens watched a short video of a woman in an old ankara blouse being told she did not belong in her own restaurant, and felt something tighten in their chests with recognition. The video had reached 1.2 million views. The headline on Platform 24 read, "She built the restaurant. He almost stole it." She sat down and ordered pepper soup. Adunola had not planned any of it. She had not leaked the video, had not authorized its sharing, had not called a single journalist. She had simply continued doing what she had always done, moving quietly, working thoroughly, and trusting that the truth, if left to stand on its own, would eventually be the loudest thing in the room. She arrived at Olu Gold at 10 that morning. She came in through the main entrance, the way she had come in 3 weeks ago, but today she was not wearing her old ankara blouse, not because that blouse had been wrong, but because today was a different kind of occasion. She wore a cream and gold osso oak wrapper skirt and a structured blouse with 3/4 sleeves, and her hair was out, natural and full, and she wore the small gold earrings her father had given her on her graduation day in 1991. The staff was waiting. All of them, kitchen, floor, bar, host, lined up not because she had asked them to be, but because Adunola had organized it when word spread that she was coming this morning. They stood in the same dining room where 3 weeks ago she had stood and told them who she was, and the energy was entirely different. She greeted each of them by name, slowly, working down the line. When she reached Taiwo, she stopped. He looked different. Not physically, but there was something in his posture that had changed. The defensive fold of the arms was gone. He stood straighter, and yet somehow more open, the way a person looks when they have been thinking seriously about something and have arrived, at cost, at a conclusion.
Taiwo, she said.
Madam. He held eye contact. I want to say again properly that I am sorry. Not because of the video, and not because of what happened to my position here, but because what I did to you was wrong in itself. You deserved dignity. Every person who comes through that door deserves dignity. He paused. I have been thinking about my mother, about what I would feel if someone spoke to her the way I spoke to you. Adunola looked at him for a long time. Your position here is secure, she said. And I want you to be part of our service training for new staff. I want you to tell them this story.
He blinked. The full story, she said.
Including the part where you were wrong, because that is the most useful part for them to hear. He nodded slowly, and she saw, before he could cover it, that his eyes were bright. She continued down the line, and then stood at the head of the room and looked at all of them. We had 3 weeks of difficulty, she said. And you all showed up every day and ran this place beautifully. I want you to know that I saw every invoice, every shift, every review. Olu Gold did not miss a single service during a period when its owner was dealing with a legal crisis. She looked around the room. That is because of you. I built the walls. You are the life inside them. She paused. The acquisition attempt is fully halted. The criminal proceedings are in motion and in the hands of the law. I am not going to carry that story into this dining room anymore. She straightened. What I am going to carry in is a plan to expand. Olu Gold Abuja opens in the 2nd quarter of next year, and we will be staffing it largely from this team. Applications from anyone interested will open Monday. There was a sound from the assembled staff, not quite applause, but a collective exhale that sounded like relief and excitement blended together. Adunola, who was not a demonstrative man, pressed his lips together in a way that was as close to a smile as he ever got in a professional context. At noon, when the doors opened, the first reservation arrived, a group of 6 women, ranging in age from their 40s to their 70s, who had driven from Lagos specifically to eat at the restaurant they had seen on Platform 24. They were dressed beautifully, printed dresses, structured wrappers, one woman in an agbada of her own that she wore with magnificent disregard for convention. Taiwo received them at the door. Welcome to Olu Gold, he said, and the warmth in his voice was not performance. My name is Taiwo. It's a genuine pleasure to have you with us today. Let me take you to your table. One of the women, the eldest, with silver-streaked locks and glasses that suited her face perfectly, looked at him with sharp curiosity. Are you the one? She asked. In the video? He did not look away. Yes, Ma, he said. I am. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. Good, she said simply and followed him to her table. Adunola was sitting at a table near the back, not hiding, just watching. She had a small notebook open beside her meal and was making margin notes in her quiet, deliberate handwriting. Beside the notebook was a bowl of pepper soup, the same order she had placed 3 weeks ago, executed perfectly, served without comment or condition. Sikemi slid into the chair across from her. Temitope called, she said. She's coming for lunch. Adunola looked up. Here. She said she wants to see the place her mother built. Sikemi smiled. Those were her exact words. Adunola was quiet for a moment. She looked out at the dining room, the crystal chandeliers, the polished floors, the warm chatter of people eating well and feeling seen, the soft current of Afrobeats underneath everything like a heartbeat. She thought about her father, who had traded fabric in a market stall and believed with complete sincerity that patience was the most dangerous weapon a woman could carry. She thought about the borrowed 40,000 naira and the sick mother who had recovered. About Funmaleo, who had been afraid and had been used and had, in the end, chosen the harder right. About Kalawol, who had arrived too late at truths that might have saved them, and who was, she allowed herself this, not only a villain, a person who had made ruinous choices, a person who had made her stronger, though he had never intended to. She thought about Taiwo at the front of the room, receiving those 6 women from Lagos with a grace that had been learned at cost. She thought about Temitope, driving here to see what her mother had built. She picked up her spoon. The pepper soup was, as always, perfect. Not because the recipe was complicated, but because it had been made with care, by people who had been taught that the smallest offering, a bowl of soup, a table by the window, a dignified greeting at the door, could be either the most ordinary thing in the world or the most extraordinary, depending entirely on how much of yourself you put into it. Adunola Savage had put everything into it, and it was still here. And so was she. Somewhere across the city, in a quiet office near Bodija, Remy Babatide was signing the final paperwork confirming his resignation from Sengo Hospitality Group. He had already accepted a new position. The offer had come, handwritten and formal, on the letterhead of Adunola Enterprises. He smiled when he opened it. And that is the full story of Adunola Savage, a woman who was shamed in her own restaurant, watched her husband try to steal what she built, and chose to answer every single blow with patience, precision, and quiet, extraordinary power. If this story moved you, if you saw yourself, or your mother, or a woman you love in Adunola's journey, please leave a comment below. Tell us, what was the moment that hit you hardest? Was it the pepper soup? The key? The phone call to Temitope? Drop your thoughts. We want to hear from you. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and share this story with every strong woman in your life who deserves to hear it. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that quiet is not weak, and patience is not passive, and the woman eating alone at a corner table might just own the entire room. Turn on your notifications, because more stories like this are coming. And you do not want to miss a single one. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next story.